10:30 here in New York and 10:30 also in Washington, D.C. If you're just joining us this morning, we're waiting in a matter of moments here. Bottom screen left there, that's the CEO of BP, Tony Hayward, waiting on his opening comments and the question and answer to follow in this House subcommittee on what's happening with the oil gusher. Screen right, that has been so prominent now for almost 60 days. We heard from Joe Barton, a Republican from Texas, about 15 minutes ago, say that the deal that BP struck with the White House yesterday, $20 billion in escrow, was a $20 billion shakedown. What does John Boehner think about that? He's the Ohio Republican, the House Minority Leader, with me now from the Hill. How are you, sir? And good morning to you.
Bill, good morning.
Would you call it a shakedown? $20 billion?
I have said since the beginning that BP ought to be responsible for all of this cleanup. And the fact is that they've agreed to put this $20 billion in escrow. I don't know in what context Mr. Barton was making that remark, but I'm glad that BP has accepted responsibility for their actions.
Mm-hmm. And they should clean it up, I imagine, too, to the fullest extent.
They should clean it up.
Yeah.
Listen, we need to get the oil, we need to get the leak stopped, we need to get this mess cleaned up. And we also need to find out what happened and to make sure that that mistake never can happen again.
Why do you think those answers have been so elusive? Because, frankly, I think a lot of Americans tuned in the other night to the Oval Office address with President Obama, and they wanted to get a better handle on some of the things that you're raising right there. Why have they been so escapable?
I really don't know, Bill. I know that there's a report that the Minerals Management Service did an inspection of this well some 10 days before the explosion. But for whatever reason, the administration will not turn that document over to the United States Congress. I think it's clear that BP bears responsibility here for what happened and to make sure it gets cleaned up. But secondly, there was a failure here of government. And we need to get to the bottom of what did the government know, when did they know it, because their reaction to all of this has been to blame someone else. And there's no question that the government has some responsibility here and ought to be held responsible for their failures as well.
Let's get specific. What could or should the White House have done better in the previous 58 or 59 days?
Well, I think the fact that the president nor his senior staff talked to the BP executives until some 50-some days into this causes me to wonder why not. The fact that the president took him so long to get down there raises questions. But I do think that...
just stop on that point. Do you think that would change the facts that we're seeing today through this camera that's on TV?
I think it could have gotten more materials in place sooner to help contain this problem. But let's be honest here. This is a big disaster, and I think that BP is being held responsible, and they should be.
I don't know if you're aware or not, but Henry Waxman, the Democrat from California, in his opening statements, quickly turned the conversation, as we saw the other night, toward clean energy in America and a new energy bill. What are you willing to support that would meet with the Democrats for what's on the table from their side, that would take us not just to cleaner energy, but to an energy policy that creates jobs in America, perhaps provides incentives to companies in America to build things like wind turbines here in America as opposed to buying them from China and putting them in fields in Texas?
Well, Bill, what's happening here is that the president and some liberals here in Congress want to use this disaster as an excuse for imposing their cap-and-trade national energy tax on America. And what this bill would do would be to drive up the cost of energy in our country and drive millions of American jobs overseas. This is not what the American people want. And what we really need to do is to sit down in a bipartisan way to figure out how we do all of the above. Because the green energy we all want, and we want it sooner rather than later. But it's going to take a number of years for it to ramp up. And in the meantime, we've got to continue to explore for oil and gas. We need clean coal technology. We need nuclear energy. And yes, we also need to speed up the development of renewables. And we can do that, but we ought to be doing it together And we should not use this disaster as an excuse to do irresponsible cap-and-trade legislation, which now they're talking about trying to do after the election. I think every Democrat member should come forward and say whether they're interested in doing this bill behind closed doors after the election. I think the American people ought to know this before the election.
Just to let our viewers know, there's an article written today about a lame duck session that could pass this through before the new Congress would come into place and be seated about, come January. Just one more quick question on this, and I understand your position, the argument you're making here. As it stands today, and the House has already passed its version, it's sitting on the floor of the Senate, or not quite yet on the floor of the Senate. Many argue that it cannot pass today. Do you believe this Congress is ready to pass a clean energy bill or a cap-and-trade bill, whatever phrase you want to attach to it? Yes or no?
Well, the House passed this bill a year ago, but if you had that same bill on the House, on the floor of the House today that passed a year ago, I think they'd get 50 less votes because people understand how devastating it would be to our economy.
Wow. John Boehner, thank you for coming in today, the House Minority Leader, the Republican out of Ohio, as we wait on Tony Hayward. John Boehner, thank you.
Thank you.
Patty.